Welcome to Savage Minds. I'm your host, Julian Vigo. Today's guest is Jess De Wahls. Originally from Berlin, Jess De Wahls has quickly established her name as the enfant terrible of British textile arts. Feminism, misogyny, and fetishism, combined with creative textile recycling, plays a major part in her prolific output. Jess creates highly intricate embroideries as well as hand-sewn relief portraits from upcycled clothing, a technique for which she has coined the term retex sculpture. Supporting female liberation while critically exploring contemporary feminism and embracing recycling and reuse are paramount to her practice. Her extensive body of work has been exhibited and sold internationally, featured online, as well as in print. In addition to her own practice, Jess also teaches her very own style of contemporary embroidery in national and international workshops. I welcome Jess De Wahls to Savage Minds. I came across your name in what occurred to you after your 2019 blog entry where you wrote, "A woman is an adult human female, not an identity or feeling." And you also asserted that humans cannot change sex. So, as a result of this statement, the Royal Academy removed your work from its gift shop over your views, which some complained as being transphobic.
Yes.
The Royal Academy also wrote on Instagram something I found a bit alarming. It said, "Thank you to all those for bringing an item in the RA shop by an artist expressing transphobic views to our attention." This, of course, erupted in upheaval from both sides of the argument. Can you tell our listeners about what happened and some of the things that we definitely did not read about in the papers as to why your work was pulled from the Royal Academy's gift shop and the implications to your career?
Sure. The item in that gift shop was actually floral embroidery patches, which have nothing whatsoever to do with my thoughts and opinions. And this has just been the end of a long string, I suppose, of a harassment campaign, if you will, since I did write that blog in 2019, because the same people that have started the pile on with the Royal Academy this time, which is I like to call the guild of envious embroiderers, I guess. They because it always starts somewhere, and it seems to be the same type of people who seem to start this the pile-ons, the campaigns against me, the complaints against me. It was an embroiderer who started with the Royal Academy, who went on her Instagram, and so someone found out after the Royal Academy had already stocked my patches for more than a year. Someone had found out that I had just redelivered something to them, like an order. And the only way they could have found that out was because I posted it on my Patreon, which is the subscriber-only platform. So somebody's obviously paying to get this information about me, which is quite staggering, to be fair. It's quite the commitment to try and get me out of a job. But so this is how this whole started with the Royal Academy. But initially it started with a blog that I wrote, and ever since I've been sort of declared persona non grata. I had to leave my little hair salon, which I had as a sort of subsidized business for my art, that I ran out of Soho Theatre in the cabaret dressing room 2 days a week. And I was there for 8.5 years. And then I wrote that blog, and I did the embroidery that I called Somewhere Over the Rainbow. Something went terribly wrong. And I anticipated a backlash, but I had no concept of knowing how bad that could be. It was pretty terrible. And within 2 or so months of posting the blog, I ended up having to leave Soho Theatre because the pressure just got so big from online mobs, if you will, who asserted pressure on the theatre and on me. And eventually we decided that it's better for both of us, that I left because I didn't feel that comfortable anymore being in the middle of Soho and people knowing where I work, it didn't feel that great anymore. And then what followed was, basically just a 2-year smear campaign against me. Anything I touched, anybody I worked with, everybody was immediately sort of tarnished with the brush of, oh, if you work with her, you must also be transphobic, which is ridiculous in and of itself. And I don't even entertain the idea that I am transphobic. Because, I mean, so if understanding basic human biology and knowing that humans can't change sex makes me transphobic, well, then I guess, guilty as charged. But that's just ridiculous, because that's not a minority viewpoint that I have. And it's not even a viewpoint, it's what we're being taught in school. So so they kept, every time I would collaborate with someone, there was like my little anti-fan club, if you will, who started pile-ons onto the people that I collaborated with. So at some point I decided to no longer do that, because it just felt horrendous to have to fend off these self-righteous little warriors every time. So I just kind of worked on my own stuff. And since I had to leave Soho Theatre and then COVID happened, I really had time to concentrate on my art. And it turns out there's a lot of people who like my work and support my work. And so I managed to actually become more successful the more time I spent on my art and stick to my guns, because I think a lot of people, they get faced with this backlash and they back down. They turn around and they repent as, expected and demanded by the mob, which I never have, and I won't, because it's just a ridiculous proposition. And I stand by everything I wrote 2 years ago. So then this whole Royal Academy thing started off, and I just looked at it much the same as what had happened in the previous 2 years. So for me, it was just another, oh, here we go, great.
Yeah.
And I completely underestimated just how much bigger this was. Because for me, it was just another place where I stopped my work,
Right.
But the outrage was huge with the embroidery community. And I'm, yeah, I don't consider myself part of any such community, but I've been ostracized by them nonetheless, according to a handful of people. And so it's all started off, and it started spiraling unbeknownst to me, because I had blocked kind of the worst offenders for a long time. And then people started sending me screenshots telling me what had been going on all day already. Sorry, unbeknownst to me. And before long, the Royal Academy got in touch, emailed me saying, oh, we had 8 complaints from the public, which, I mean, really, 8 complaints is a bit laughable. But anyway, so that email was still very, very friendly. And they said, well, we need to investigate. So I said, look, 8 complaints is hardly representative of the members of the public. And I can bring you an extent of that quite easily with people who will share my viewpoints on this, which are, as of Maya Forstatter's case, protected by law also. So let's not do this in the public. And so then within a day, instead of getting back to me, they did what you originally already said, that they posted this on their Instagram story to their 500,000 followers, that they will know, like they were thanking those that brought it to their attention, which is just so insane. I mean, that wording in and of itself was ridiculous. And that they will no longer stock this artist, never mind that they just had restocked me. And then I was made aware of that, and I just took a screenshot because, like I said, for me, it was just another, okay, well, great, onwards and upwards. And then I took a screenshot and posted it on my Twitter and just said, that's where we're at. Because in the meantime, lots of people had been in touch with me saying, is there anything we can do? Can we get in touch with the Royal Academy? And I was like, let's just not get into a mudslinging fest here. Let's see if I can resolve this sort of quietly behind the scenes, because I really have no desire to make this blow up. But then, of course, it really did blow up. So I posted that on Twitter and put my phone to the side, and then woke up to just a lot of journalists in my inbox. And it kind of really spiraled from there and just really hit mainstream within a day of that. So yeah.
Well, it's interesting they picked on you, because I've spent a lot of time in the Royal Academy, including its bookshop and gift shop.
Mm-hmm.
And they have books on the body. They have books on figurative drawing.
Mhm.
They have books on the body. There's one, in fact, that's entitled Body of Art that includes works from Maya Lin, Anthony Gormley,
Yeah.
Marina Abramovich, etc. They chose to target you,
Mhm.
not Bruce Nauman, not Joan Jonas, you know. And there's something to be said for the way that the Royal Academy took 8 complaints, had
Mhm.
zero knowledge of how these people function. But
Mhm.
one, those 8 complaints could have been the same person with sock accounts, or more likely, they organized together to do this. Someone put something up in a forum, private or public, read it or otherwise, and said, well, we found that Jess
Yeah,
De
yeah.
Wahls has done something very transphobic, so here's the email of the Royal Academy. Everyone, write. Now, the fact the Royal Academy was willing to put out such a statement on social media
Mhm.
as to what transphobic alludes to without really defining it is alarming, because anyone who's been on Twitter for 5 minutes knows that transphobic means nothing. I hate to say it.
Yeah, yeah.
There's nothing behind it. In fact, I'm a bit more of a radical in the sense of I don't think it's like some women even say, well, there is real transphobia. No. What
Mm.
there is there's misogyny and there
Mhm.
is homophobia. And then there
Yeah.
is this thing that they are calling transphobia, which is disagreement of opinion. And I don't
Yeah.
think that institutions like the Royal Academy are clued in, partly
Mhm.
because of the people they employ, like Adam Kozari, who infamously tweeted after they issued you an apology, he
Mhm. Yeah.
tweeted Google define performative, which was a veiled criticism
Yep.
of his employer's apology to you.
Mhm.
So I have to wonder, Jess, is this a case perhaps that institutions like the Royal Academy are not really being captured entirely, but they have some folks like Kozari working for them as their social media guru who have a hold on their institutional public face such that they can go to Instagram and Twitter and make such statements, and their employer remains a bit dependent on them for the social, cultural, and even age variant interpretations.
Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah. To be fair, I don't think he actually still works for them.
He doesn't.
As far as I've yeah. Um, well, I don't wish anybody out of a job, but he seemed to have wished himself out of a job. So, congratulations, I should say. So, yeah, no, I agree. I think I've been pondering about this quite a few times, and I do think it is. For the longest time, people kept saying this stuff is just in the universities. I mean, it starts in America. It's just in the universities. This is, they're going to hit real life, and they're going to realize all this nonsense is not going to translate into real life. Except that's nonsense. It is translating into real life in a very authoritative way, and it's exactly what you just said. These people are being employed by people who don't, who look at this and go, social media, I'm gonna give this job to someone who clearly knows what they're doing. um, and then these people become gatekeepers. They become a bit drunk on their own power, I think, and they make executive decisions, as we've seen with this guy, and completely don't even think through the consequences, it seems. And so, yeah, no, it's a huge problem. And I think a lot of people in sort of the higher up positions, they sort of they're worried that they'll take the wrong step and they will get the backlash and the wrath of the youth, or I don't know. So they hand it over to these gatekeepers, and that's a huge problem. That is definitely institutional capture, and I mean, we see it everywhere. It's everywhere. You see it in museums, you see it in universities. Like, look at what happens, or what just happened to Kathleen Stock and Joe Phoenix, and I mean, the list is quite long now, which is hilarious when people say, oh, there's no such thing as cancel culture, and you go, well, actually, look at this list. So no, I do think there's this ideology has well and truly come off screen, and has sort of fe- festered itself into organizations, and that's really dangerous. And I think I don't know, I hope that people are slowly starting to wake up to this. At least it kind of feels like that here in the UK. But I don't know. I'd also, I also don't want to be too optimistic, because I do think we're in a really dangerous place. Because I have so many conversations with people who say, I completely agree with you, but I couldn't say that at work because I would be sacked. And that in and of itself, that should give you pause. That should mean you really should speak. In fact, everybody should speak, because what's happening is pluralistic ignorance. People think that if they say this, like everybody else thinks against them. It's a bit like what we had with the Stasi in East Berlin. It's actually, in fact, a lot like that. So everybody's too scared already to speak, when in fact that is a majority held view, and it isn't an opinion. It's not an opinion that humans can't change sex. That's just a fact. And it's utterly bizarre to me when I look at Twitter and I have these people who go completely pompously, oh yeah, but it's just proven humans can change sex. And I'm like, what?
But Jess, I'm sorry, there's something you're missing here that I hate to have to get you educated, as they say in internet parlance, but Nemo. Nemo is at the fore of this, right? I mean, isn't it amazing that we're having discussions that even at the time of Da Vinci would have been, what the hell? And now the reference is a Disney fish. Amazing.
A Disney fish, and also slugs, according to what Margaret Atwood. I cannot. It's quite remarkable. I'm reading The End of the World is Flat at the moment,
Yes.
by Simon Edge, and it is hilarious, and it is so accurate in sort of observing the lunacy that's happening right now. I'm literally laughing my way through this book, and at the same time I'm not, because it's just it presents it so exactly. It's like what you said. It's you've got seemingly intelligent people, in fact intelligent people, actually completely guzzled up this ideology. And I think in part it's people who are too scared to say something. In other part is people who should know better, but who have been completely brainwashed. It's brainwashed. I can't explain it any other way. It's bizarre.
If you had told me that this began after COVID or during COVID, and I might think, okay, people were going through some really tough psychological moments, living with too many flatmates, what have you. But this has been going on since the early noughts in terms of a radical movement that is seeking out to target people. I'll give you an example for myself. Before the show, you and I discussed how I was teaching at Goldsmiths, and miraculously my visiting professorship disappeared after my first publication in June of 2013 on this issue. Now, that aside, what I find really alarming in all this is that you've got an institution like Goldsmiths that has been chock full of this. I've had discussions with colleagues there who were too afraid to speak out. We're talking back in 2013 and 14 still. I've had colleagues who've sent me messages. You refer to the Stasi. It reminded me of this then. They wanted to meet up. They were afraid to put anything into email. And they would tell me about some of the things that they had witnessed. Yet, we've got a crisis where some maintain this came uniquely from academia. I think it's a bit more complex than that, where an ideology that is supplanting basic science, that you would fail a GSC exam or you wouldn't even get into university unless you understood that men are not women, that the female sex is the one that gets pregnant, etc., etc. And what I wonder about in all of this is how the capture has gone so far into institutions. We know which ones are more captured than others, but there seems to be a lot of it at Goldsmiths and Leeds, for instance. I'm throwing out two there.
Yeah.
And at the same time, these institutions are within walking distance of some of the countries, if not the world's foremost scientific institutions. What is going on when you have an institution that takes, let's say, your flower art pieces? When we think of flowers, maybe some people will go right to Georgia O'Keeffe and that image that was compared to the female anatomy. And they will attempt to make into are something that's a meta-narrative. As you pointed out, you had not made any commentary in your artwork about anything to do with gender. And I'm thinking to this quote, I'm going to read you this quote by Walter Benjamin. He says, fascism attempts to organize the newly proletarianized masses without affecting the property structure from which the masses strive to eliminate. Fascism sees its salvation in giving these masses not their right, but instead a chance to express themselves. The masses have a right to change property relations. Fascism seeks to give them an expression while preserving property. The logical result of fascism is the introduction of aesthetics into political life. I've been saying this for years in terms of the left seems to have abandoned entirely historical material analysis, from worker relations to housing to sex-based analysis. Like, why are women fewer in prison than men? Why do women commit fewer murders, et cetera, But the left has abandoned this. Instead, they go after you, they go after Kathleen Stock, they go after many women who are not making it into the media at all because they're coming from working class backgrounds. I've had a few of them on the show. They say to me, I'm not even political. I had Carrie Black on the show. I'm not even political. You have so many people who recognize they don't even have to be feminists. They recognize that men are not women. And this has become the way the left has derailed all material reality, while, as Benjamin says, giving people a chance to express themselves. Has self-expression replaced material analysis on the left?
Oh, I think so. Yeah. And I mean, I would say also what you were referring to with the flowers, they didn't even attempt to turn it into something. Because I mean, unquestionably, I do make political statements with my other artwork, but in this particular instance, they were just seeking to censor me as a person. It hadn't anything to do with the artwork, but they didn't even make a secret out of that. It wasn't, there was no them trying to interpret it. It was purely based on my opinions. And so yeah, no, I think the left I I can't even call things left and right and even center anymore. It just feels so all over the place because what they traditionally stood for, that doesn't seem to be the case any longer. And so, yes, it's all about self-expression. It's all about the I, the me, the I have to say something. And there's also something really tribal, because I find that, as I was saying earlier, the guilt of envious embroiderers, like me and my friends sort of call it that piss-takingly, but in a way, there's truth in that, because it seems as though when you look at a lot of the people that these things happen to, oftentimes the initial instigators seem to be people out of the same field as them. You've got the whole Knittergate, and I've seen some stuff like the purity cycles in the yarn community, and it even sounds ridiculous, but it does feel like a chance for sort of people to express themselves, but also rip someone down who's made a success out of themselves in one way or another. Um, so I don't know. I mean, there's nothing leftist about what's happening there, because I would always have placed myself on the left in terms of values, and progressive values many times. But what's now classed as progressive to me is actually completely regressive. We're completely reverting backwards to super sexist stereotypes, when people just, a lot of people who haven't actually looked into what's being talked about, they would say like, oh, but why can't someone just, if they want to feel, if they feel like a woman? And I keep saying, what does it feel like to be a woman if you're not a woman? How on earth would you possibly be able to know and try and explain without using sexist stereotypes? And there's nothing, silence, it's.
I would even go further. I tell people this all the time. I've had 3 children and I still don't know what it feels like to be a woman. Now I can say what a woman physically does and experiences, or at least this woman, but because they also like to run to, well, what about women born without uteri? What about women who don't want to have children? What about menopausal women? So they turn it on as if we're now ageist hacks, but they get around the specificity of reality, because there is something really important about what women experience and the link to the fact that oppression exists within certain strains of society. It can be class-based, it can be immigrant, it can be female, it can be children. It just seems like this entire movement has been created to punk us all. There are days that I wonder, has someone just funded a massive joke on us and is laughing? I just don't know what to think some days.
I don't. Yeah, I mean, I've been having many of those conversations and tried to work it out, but I don't even. I mean, it feels like a huge joke, but like not at the same time. I think there's a huge financial drive behind all of this, because if you think about how women have been fed for the longest times, all the ideas that, if you're not this, then you can't be happy. Like, you need to be slim, you need to be this, you need to be that. Like all the products that were being sold constantly, because an unhappy person makes a great customer, right? So then I think up until the 2000s, there was the male grooming industry was virtually zero in terms of advertisement, and it's shot up, immeasurably since the 2000s. And now it almost feels as though, well, that market has maybe not been saturated, but maybe brought as far as possible. And then you look at, well, what if we have another, I don't know, like of 130 new genders and gender identities and all this nonsense where it sells, right? I mean, the stuff that I've seen online, oh, look, I've seen non-binary clothes, finally something I can wear. And I'm thinking, gee, that's the sort of stuff we used to wear in the 90s when I was a kid, we just called it clothes, And I do think there's a huge market. It's a self-feeding machine, and it's hysterical to me when those same people have all the same stuff in their bio, like anti-capitalism, Marxist. And I'm thinking, you have no clue what you're talking about. You are literally being milked by the machine, and you don't even know it. You don't. It's yeah. So I do think there's a huge financial incentive for a lot of big companies to promote this ideology. I do think so, and it exerts control, and it takes away control, particularly from women. And well, that's always been a huge favorite, hasn't it? So yeah, there's multiple reasons why I think this has landed so firmly, because when people try and attack me online and they come with all this, oh, you're a white, het, cis, whatever, all the labels, and I'm like, well, no, actually, I'm just Jess. There's like this incessant need to put people in boxes and categorize them and pack them up, and how dare they venture out of those boxes. Imagine if I would turn around right now and say that I identify as non-binary, I wouldn't be allowed to, would I? I don't know if you saw that video with the guy who went to the Netflix employees protest with the sign saying, "I like Dave, jokes are
he was
funny."
on the show last week.
Oh God, I have to listen to that. I thought he was
you'll
hilarious.
laugh. He's great. He is brilliant.
Yeah. I know, and he was so calm.
And he's exactly, I told him I wouldn't have kept my cool. And the thing here is that I wouldn't have, because they were being aggressive towards him. And you should listen to the show, because he really gets at the heart of so much. And I was relieved as we spoke, because sometimes when I talk about this issue with people who know that we're right, but are afraid maybe to say so on the show, I was worried he might say, well, no, he didn't go down the Nemo routine. It's so much irony behind a movement that has done what I call the cha-cha-cha in terms of arguments, because it's gender is not between your ears, it's between your legs. Sex is between your ears, cha-cha-cha. And sex is emotional and gender is biological, cha-cha-cha. Then when they say, don't reduce us to the sum of our parts, and then we're uterus havers, cha-cha-cha, menstruators, cha-cha-cha. And you're like, do you guys hear yourself? And the funny thing about the guys at Netflix that really, Vito cracked me up, because I first saw the tweet by his partner, his partner who got his head bashed in, by the way.
I saw that. Yeah.
And what killed me, he said, what did he say? Comedy is funny or something like that.
Jokes are funny.
That's it. Jokes are funny. And I thought, this is a brilliant protest. So that's when I reached out to them. And I saw that first tweet. Now, here we are. And of course, Vito talks about the irony of people who do screenwriting and comedy, the irony that they want to no platform others. But this is where you are too. You are being no platformed by people who run an institution, who work for and within the institution of art. And art, as anyone knows who's read 2 seconds of history, has always been at the intersections of cultural and political debates. Now, let's step back to the 1980s. You're a bit younger than me. And in the 1980s, I was in the university, and there was flaming the culture wars in the US from the far right with Jesse Helms going off about Robert Mapplethorpe's photos of black buttocks. I'm quoting. Yeah. He was obsessed with this. Ne'er did I ever think back then that I would once wish that he were around, because that was lightweight compared to what we're dealing with today. Because back then, even his peers within the Republican Party, many of them knew he was batshit nuts. Now, today, it's far worse, because it's our people, quote unquote, I have to keep putting that in quotes, because like you, this has completely obliterated left right, which is why I have issues even when gender critical feminists say, oh, but they collaborated with the right. I'm like, are you hearing yourself? I know journalists who publish with right-wing magazines and then criticize some of the women in North America who have reached across the aisle, because there are many things to say from this. Feminism is not only for whom you like or left-leaning women, first of all. Let's begin there. If anything, the argument could be better made that feminism might be more needed amongst the right, but leave that. Then we've got this notion that if you speak to the rights of women, that you are somehow left or right. But wait, women's bodies span that spectrum, as it were. I never thought I'd hate a word spectrum so much in my life, but I'm going to reuse it. The spectrum or the umbrella. So we've got this spectrum, umbrella, whatever, sleeping bag of identities out there that we're all supposed to be choosing. And of course, I was offended by cis from the get-go, because I'm like, wait a sec, my entire life I've had to fight against these kinds of normative prejudices. And let's call them what they are, because they are prejudicial. I don't wake up thinking, where's my Laura Ashley flower print dress that I want to wear? And where are my, as my friend calls them, fuck me pumps? This is the thing, is I actually don't think the clothes have much to do with gender. They have much more to do with the individual putting on those clothes and how he or she wants to feel or dress. And you're having to defend your right to make a living. So I really like your art. I had a look at a lot of your work in the weeks after your name came into UK media. And I was very impressed with the fact that you don't just talk the talk. It's not just about your one-off blog, let's say, on transgender identity. You do what you have called a retext sculpting. And this is something that reminds me of some of the work of Louise Bourgeois and how she worked with certain types of fabric, Louise Messager as well. And I was just wondering if you might situate some of your art within the larger discourse of formally working class and historical materialist art.
Well, I think I should say to that I've never studied art. I've sort of self-studied in the sense that I read lots of books on artists that I like, and lo and behold, Louise Bourgeois was someone I came across actually quite late, and I love her work, absolutely love her work. But for me, the drive with the retext sculptures in particular, which currently I'm not doing so much because I got so obsessed with embroidery and I just got hooked. But the retext sculptures, that was driven initially really by thinking about recycling and how we don't do that, and how we just dispose of everything, and what is the worth in something if it's made out of something that's otherwise trash or discarded. And that was my thinking behind it. It really wasn't a sort of like mm, deeper thinking about its positioning, if you will. And same with embroidery. I think it became much clearer to me the longer I've been embroidering, just how much importance that art form actually has within feminism and within women's resistance. Historically, it's almost like I started it um, without having thought about it, and by doing it, it forced me to think about it deeper and read about it more and learn more to that effect, which now seems to make it even more meaningful, in all sorts of ways. So my work is concerned with environmental issues and with feminist issues, first and foremost, and it feels as though the issues came first in my thinking because I'm a trained hairdresser at the end of the day. That's how I came into art. And the concerns were in my head first, and I think art has been for me always the way to express them best. And as you were saying about the blog about the trans issues, I've never written a blog before. It was an attempt to not be misrepresented, which of course was futile only in the sense that those people who were hellbound to misrepresent me, they managed to do that regardless. But it's been read by hundreds of thousands of people at this point, and a lot of people completely understand and agree with it. In fact, the vast majority does. And the only reason I did write the blog was so that I could sort of put some of my thoughts to the piece that I did. Usually I would make pieces, and I quite like the idea that you give, you make the art with your intentions in mind, and you do give artist statements, but I think art is also what the viewer brings to it and makes out of it themselves and how it speaks to different people. But so yeah, I haven't thought about it in any sort of academic sense. It's always been driven from solution finding, I would think. It's same with the patches, the flower patches. The initial thought behind that was to create like an incentive for people to recycle their old clothes. I thought, it's one thing to stand there and go, oh, you should recycle, you shouldn't throw things away, you should reuse things, you should appreciate clothes, and that everything goes into landfills and it's really terrible. That's one way, that's the stick approach. And I thought, well, what about if we did the carrot approach? If we say, look, yeah, create something so pretty that maybe you look at it, and this is what's been the response throughout, that people look at the patches and go, they're so pretty. Now I need some old jeans jacket, and then they actually even go to secondhand shops and get themselves something old because it just works so nicely. So that's usually how I structure my work and the thought that goes behind it. Yeah. And the same with feminist issues. I find that the visual expression, even though I do like to write and I do like to talk, but the visual expression has always been sort of my preferred way of putting things out in the world and engage with people about these issues.
You're listening to Savage Minds, and we hope you're enjoying the show. Please consider subscribing. We don't accept any money from corporate or commercial sponsors, and we depend upon listeners and readers just like you. Now, back to our show. We are seeing a movement that many feminists call a men's rights activist movement. This is just a faction of it. And I cannot disagree with them, to be honest, because when we see that women do the brunt of unpaid labor, they bear the brunt of global inequality, and they are paid far less, even in Western societies, than men.
Yep.
Globally, women spend 4.5 hours of their day doing unpaid work, for instance. In wealthier countries, the gap is smaller. But the problem is that even in countries like, let's say, Norway, where women are said to be more on par, they still spend more than an hour of unpaid work than men. That's just an example. Where my family lives in India, that gets exploded out of belief. So how can we approach this as, let's say, private citizens within our places of work? I mean, you work independently, so do I. We depend upon a public face in terms of, I use social media for a lot of my public face, not all of it. those people who are working for employers that they know if they speak out or if they put their name on their Twitter account that they will be out of a job, is it not high time that parliamentarians get around to drafting a bill that deals more forcefully with this kind of online harassment? Because so much of this has come from online. When you leave Twitter sphere or Instagram and you go into your local Waitrose or Tesco's and you ask someone if that's a man or a woman, they're just going to look at you like you're mad.
Yeah, see, yes, I think it is time for that, but at the same time, I just saw some proposition about some prison prisonable offense where, say, if you it was about online harassment. I don't want to make up stuff now, but it was some sort of proposition that if you cause a pile on or if someone feels uncomfortable, you can get into prison up to 2 years. That was some strange new thing I just saw a couple of days ago that people were sort of discussing on Twitter sphere. And of course, the issue then is, what if someone says something ridiculous, like say Margaret Atwood at the moment does, and then there's like hundreds of people who respectfully disagree? Does that still count as harassment? Is that, because I know it's all very uncomfortable. It's incredibly uncomfortable when hundreds of thousands of people pile on, because I've been there. But there is respectful disagreement, which can still feel really intimidating when hundreds of thousands of people do it. And then there is plain out harassment, which is what I've been getting and which Kathleen has been getting and lots of other women have been getting, and men too. So I don't know how easy that is to discern. It's
No, clearly we can't just have pylons as the determinant, because pylons can be even as bad as they can be. They can be also productive. I would say the line should be perhaps where people start writing employers over personal thoughts on Twitter, that the real burden of responsibility should be falling on employers to say, thank you for writing us. That is her private account. Good day. Why is that not happening? And as you notice, because it's going on in London everywhere for the last decade, everyone wants to put their badge of this is who we are and we received this award. I'll give you an example. This is something I'm sort of breaking a trust of my own, but I'm very happy to do it because I sort of want to go public with this. I was pregnant and I was on the job market. I had just come back from a post at the University of Liverpool in China, and I wanted to secure a job in academia. I had 2 interviews the same day. It will not surprise you that on both interviews, the first one being at the London School of Economics, I was discriminated against. And it was shocking to see a panel of all women say to me, well, and they didn't notice that I was pregnant. I was wearing this Japanese short dress, long shirt, depending on how you view it. And they said, is there anything, they let me know I was the top candidate. They said, is there anything stopping you from beginning the post 1st of September? And I said, no, but around the 26th, I am going to need to take probably a day or 2 off. And they said, why? And I pointed at my stomach and I said, well, I'm going to have a baby. The women on this panel gasped and they said, oh my God, are you sure you want to have a job and teach? That's a lot of responsibility. Another said, don't you want to be home with your child? This went on. And let me tell you, my heart sunk. I couldn't even believe it because I was really pregnant, and I was not like one of those women that gets pregnant and you don't know. I was an incredibly thin woman who got pregnant. So it was more than obvious, but maybe the dress, and who knows, they didn't see it, whatever.
Yeah.
But what sunk my heart was this reaction. Long story short, I had to go through this mediation process where I was offered peanuts. And the mediator kept saying, what do you want? I said, well, they said I had the job. I want the job. No, they've already offered it to someone. I said, no doubt a penis haver, but what not? This is part of the problem is that we've got now a trans activist stroke MRA tranche of society filled by not only men, but women. And women are having to speak up to the most base factor of biology that we get pregnant, we have children, men do not. Is there something, do you think, of a backlash that men are facing? Because let's face it, in 2021, they are not getting the jobs that they got in the 1970s or 1980s. They are not getting the senior ranking posts that they once had. And they are in direct competition with vagina havers. Is this a bit of ressentiment?
So I've been thinking about that myself for quite a bit, and I I consider myself a feminist, but I do think this othering of like I was saying earlier, the cis het white whatever male. I often wondered whether that has also produced a whole new demographic of younger people, men, who now have the choice of either becoming super woke or go completely the other way, like, because there's no middle ground anymore. So you're gonna have to just go, yeah, trans women are women. I'm fully on board with this, and so that then you're part of the in group, right? So you're not being rejected, or you I guess become some sort of complete right-wing nutter who goes the complete extreme polar opposite, just like, oh, out and out hate women. That doesn't seem to, it just becomes more and more difficult, I guess, to map out a middle path. So yes, I think maybe there is a certain level of resentment for the older generations, a difficulty for younger ones to even find a place, because if you grow up and you're constantly being told that you are the arch nemesis, the evil, why wouldn't you then I want to identify as queer, put some nail varnish on and go, I'm they, them. I'm not one of those het cis white males. It just feels like, in a way, a terrible creation as a I don't want to say as a side effect of feminism, but in a way it is all linked together too. And it's something that also needs addressing.
There's also this other issue that you referred to several times, the Margaret Atwood issue, where she has come out so TRA, recently posted something that indicated that she might see our point of view and then doubled back. And it's typical. Now, I keep thinking back to the Simone de Beauvoir quote where she says, the oppressor would not be so strong if he did not have accomplices among the oppressed.
Yeah.
Now, Margaret Atwood, author of a book where we now have the term handmaiden, became paradoxically the ultimate handmaiden. Yeah. And this is a real problem for me. It's more about the fact that she has cashed in. I'm presuming she's making some money from the television series. Yeah. She's cashed in on a concept that she's literally has created the antithesis of. And I find this both revolting and perplexing as it is telling of women like her, because you put her, she's not even a minor writer. She's someone who, if she didn't sell another book, unless she's got a severe gambling habit, would be fine until the day she dies. Yeah. So what is it about someone like Margaret Atwood that would have her cycling absolute horseshit, trying to convince her acolytes on social media that she's on, as Owen Jones would say, the right side of history, where we know, I keep having this fantasy. Here's my Owen Jones fantasy. I love...
That should not be a sentence.
Yeah, I know. Well, I have a fantasy of finding him at one of his hangout spots. I'm going to imagine he hangs out somewhere in Soho. I like that one cafe right on that corner that has really great pastries and a blue awning. And I think of finding him and saying to him, Owen, baby, where have you been? And he's not going to recognize me, of course. I'll be like, Owen, come on, please. I want you to suck my male clitoris and just film it, and I want to film that and put it out there. Now, because we know that he's full of shit in the same way that Margaret Atwood is full of shit. They say something that they do not walk. He is not having sex with women who
of course
have
not.
A male clitoris. Yeah. And Atwood is cashing in on the misery of women.
Mm-hmm.
So, what do you think is behind this? And I should say that Simone de Beauvoir has been echoed
No
in
worries.
other fields,
Yeah.
such as Paulo Freire says this as well in Pedagogy of the Oppressed. He warns of this. And it's not an uncommon social manifestation that there will be what Harriet Tubman calls the Uncle Tom. So
Mm-hmm.
we have Uncle Toms everywhere. We have the figure who is dying to get in with the ruling class by any means necessary. What
Yeah.
do you think is driving those women, even lesser known than Margaret Atwood, to take part in the pile-ons that resulted in your work being pulled or Kathleen Stock having to leave the University of Sussex?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Because I do find that there's a lot of women involved in this. And again, I think a lot of feminists don't want to hear that often, I think, but I would say the majority of people that piled onto me personally were women from the embroidery world and also from the theater world. It was, yeah, the majority were women, sadly. I don't know. I really don't have the answer for that. I find it perplexing, to say the least, that it is so, I don't know, is it internalized misogyny? Is it uh, some sort of power mm, grab? I don't know, or want? I can't explain it to myself because I'm not wired that way, which I guess is in part why I spoke up, because I find that really, even women that I disagree with, I would not want to wish that treatment upon, so I don't know. I can't believe that they actually believe what they're saying, because that just seems too ludicrous. And if they do, then we're really dealing with a cult. I mean, if they truly believe that, I could understand if someone would kind of just go halfway and say, look, uh, we've done it wrong with the gay rights movement. So now, let's just everybody live how they want to live. Because I mean, that's how it's been sold many times too, isn't it? So to try and make it out as though the same as gay people struggling for marriage equality and against homophobia, but it's not the same. It's completely not the same. It's, as I said, it's very driven by a different agenda. So I can't I can't explain to myself, or anybody else for that matter, where someone like Margaret Atwood would throw women so spectacularly under the bus. And there's other high profile women too. I don't understand. It really does seem like they've been brainwashed. It's, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of aspects of cultism within this movement.
Mm-hmm.
And the refusal to see reality is the most concerning, whether or not
Yeah.
it's the female penis nonsense or the
Oh,
Nemo
God, yeah.
argument or the
Yeah.
intersex argument. I do have my doubts as to if this would have exploded in the way it has and not just been ignored, even by politicians, had it not been for social media. There's something about this loudspeaker
Yeah.
of people being able to retweet, add commentary at their MP, at the person's employer, and try to call out people in a very similar move that we saw during the medieval period.
Oh,
Prior,
yeah.
obviously.
Yeah.
There's this whole will to people, the feminists will talk about witch burning, but let's leave witch burning aside. Repent. And I wrote a piece about this for an anthropological journal several years ago, where I compared this movement to the move for auto-da-fé within the medieval era. And there's something about having to confess your sin and purify yourself. And this purity is coming at the expense, of course, of reality. Is it Galileo? Is it Ptolemy? Where we have to now say the sun is at the center of the universe, the earth is flat, women have penises. Why would 20-somethings be interested in something that's so anathema to reality at the same time that they might even face unemployment as a result of such thoughts? I mean, can you imagine any of these folks trying to get a job at the NHS? They're a nurse, let's say, and they say, well, I have worked in maternity wards with pregnant people, especially pregnant men. Can you imagine that job interview? So I wonder to
But I
what.
can now. That's the scary thing. I can. No, because that is happening. I mean, have you spoken to midwives? That is, I mean, yeah. Yeah, I think you've spoken to Millie Hill as well, haven't you? That is happening. That's the really scary thing, actually. That's not even abstract anymore. That people go and have job interviews. This is how deeply infiltrated this nonsense is. That's the scary part. So I don't know. I mean, and as you rightly said, it is medieval. And when I was listening to Kathleen Stock yesterday, on Woman's Hour, when she was saying it felt really medieval, I kept saying that when it all started in the first place. It does. It really, you feel a bit like you're being walked down the street between all the like screaming masses, with the shame bell behind you. That's how it feels. When you have any sort of public standing whatsoever, that's how it feels. And I'm sure that it feels like that in a small way, even if you don't have a public standing, but it's just in your sort of personal environment. People do that because it goes to the heart of ostracization. People don't, it's a basic instinct to not want to be ostracized from the tribe. And that's why I was saying earlier that to me, none of this feels progressive. It feels super regressive. It feels like we're gone back in time. The behavior is the same as in medieval periods. And even though you said leave witch burning aside, but I mean, the fact that people are using flares and burning books and all this sort of stuff, it's like everything seems to be, we seem to have some sort of amnesia when it comes to historical events at this point, when people just say, yeah, but but she said something transphobic, so so we can justify this behavior. And it's like, no, you can't justify that behavior. It is positively medieval. It really is.
When I was interviewing Vito last week about the manifestation outside of Netflix headquarters, we talked about this because one of the people that came up to him was a woman who told him to repent.
No, I know, I saw that. God.
Yeah. And so this is a group. Owen Jones believes himself to be on the right side of history, but there is the irony of course, the opposite. And I think this era will go down where he will be even examined as some kind of mentally, I hate to say it, but he will go down as someone who is looked at perhaps mentally imbalanced, who did not have a firm grasp on reality, or, as I think he more deserves, is just being a capitalist hag who pretends to be anti-capitalist. The same thing with Novara Media. They got hoisted by their own petard last week when they had their account removed from social media. And these are the lords, the overlords, the Hausmeister of all wokery in London especially. These people do not have any resonance of tone in the reporting. It's just like pink news. It's transphobe this or innocent trans woman. So much of what happened to you, what's happened to me, what's happened to gazillions of women at this point, and now men, is because we have these machineries of academic fake publications, academic institutions like Sussex that had her back at the very last minute. It was already too little too late for Kathleen.
Yeah.
And then the Royal Academy that rightfully made an apology to you. I wonder if they did not dismiss the bro dude tweeting on Twitter about you. And because yours was a kind of victory, even though I'm sure it was not pleasant for you.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I was stared at by 3 women who couldn't believe I was pregnant for a job interview in 2014. So we know that women have babies. We know that sex is real. And we know that there are real sociological implications for all this.
Yeah.
Definitely. Have you thought about making vagina art?
I've been making vagina art. I've done loads of vagina art. This is the thing.
My God. I've missed the vagina art pieces. I went straight to the flowers. I'm sorry.
No. This is why I was saying earlier, they didn't try and interpret a vagina onto my flowers. I used to run, in fact, vajestic embroidery workshops, I used to call them, because lo and behold, I used to, the woman that runs or ran, I don't even know if it exists anymore, the Vagina Museum, I met her incidentally on the street in Edinburgh years ago because she saw my necklace with the big swinging ovaries and sort of jumped out on me. She's like, oh, I love this. You need to come see this exhibition. So we started talking. This was before I realized the lunacy around the trans rights movement, if you will. because I came to all this quite late, because I was so steeped in the midst of liberal or not so much liberal Soho. I didn't see it. I did not see it. And so I met up with her, and I thought it was a great idea to have a vagina museum. So I designed some patterns and ran workshops and basically donated half of what I made to help open that vagina museum. And then she went off on the deep end with the whole identity politic nonsense. I ran a vulva embroidery workshop at the Tate Modern in 2019, before I posted my blog, before I became persona non grata. So yeah, no, I've done a hell of a lot of majestic art. And in fact, my brand is Big Swinging Ovaries. So, it's this little pun I've been doing for years on that name. But it was initially a way for me of trying to, it was an exhibition that I called, like a retext sculpture exhibition that I called that name in 2014, because I wanted it to have sort of the feel of feminism without using feminism in its title, the exhibition. And I was saying to my husband then that I'm looking for something a bit like, how they say big swinging dick for someone who's sort of the mover and the shaker, if you will, in English. And I thought, I want something like that, but for women, to just really express the and as I said, big swinging pussy doesn't sound quite right. And any such abbreviation, and actually my husband came up with the big swinging ovaries, and I thought, oh, that's great. And it stuck. We were first laughing about it, and then it stuck. And then I ended up making lots of puns and embroidery work about ovaries, such as fuck ovaries and flovaries and hung ovaries. And I've got one that's end ovaries, to sort of raise awareness about endometriosis. And it was an ongoing string of that. So I've done lots of work in that regard, but this is when I started to realize that people were getting more and more extreme, when they started to say to me that what I'm doing is a bit problematic. And when I eventually published my blog, there were lots of people going, I knew she was a TERF because she was always doing this transphobic vagina art and stuff. It's like, oh, I didn't even know I was. Interesting. But that was what sort of started making me look up and go, when people that I knew out of the theater world and out of the club world and they would come to me and say things like, oh, it's a bit problematic. Or when, there was the Women's March and they all had the pussy heads on, and suddenly there were all these articles sprouting up that trans women were so sad because, the pussy heads are so exclusionary. And I thought, what are they on about? Like, I was genuinely quite oblivious to what was going on before then, because I just didn't think that people actually meant it when they said they think that trans women are women. I thought it was more of a polite kind of, oh, well, what's it to us kind of thing. I didn't think that anybody would actually believe it. So it did come as a bit of a surprise when I did realize that people were dead serious. And then they were getting so serious that I saw that people were losing jobs left, right, and center when I started to look into it deeper. And then I couldn't unsee what I saw. And then eventually I felt like I do have a public platform. I do make art that concerns very female issues, so it's important for me to be able to talk about these things and name the things by their name. And if that's suddenly deemed transphobic, then we're going to have a conversation about it. And frankly, the point at which I did publish the blog was when I could no longer not say anything. The more I learned about it, the more I was appalled about how women in particular were treated who did speak up on the subject. And I thought, I can't in any good conscience sit here and I completely agree with them and not say anything. And yes, I get tons and tons of emails to this point where people say, oh, I completely agree with you, but I'm worried to lose my job. And it's like, well, I did lose my job. I'm fortunate because I carved out, I already did my art before then, and now I've spent so much time on it. And of course, the Royal Academy backlash was so humongous that I basically sold out of everything, which was great. But but the reality is I did lose my job. I did lose the job that paid my rent. For sure, I live in London. I need to be able to somehow pay my rent, and it's not cheap. And so people say this to me, completely ignoring the fact that yes, I did. Speaking up did cost me my job, and I did it anyway. And yes, my art now is successful, which is great. But there was no guarantee for that. I did it because I couldn't not do it. I can't just look on when other people get pounded for saying the exact same thing I believe, and do nothing. I can't do that. So I knew there was a risk of me having to leave, and I did it anyway, because what's the alternative? Where are we heading if we all excuse ourselves by saying, well, but what if I lose my job? But what if you keep your mouth shut and you don't lose your job, and then you just get one after the next thing pressed upon you, and you will not ever question anything again? That is authoritarianism. That's fascism, in fact. So I get why people are afraid, but I also think, well, try and imagine what happens if everybody thinks like you. Try and play that out in your head, because that should make you more afraid, because that's a reality, and it's happened time and again in history. If you look back, I mean, we've seen it many times.